As a landlord, have you ever wondered how you want to pursue that your tenant has been owing you for months? Or as a tenant, have you ever imagined sitting in your house and your landlord just walks in? Why? Because he's the owner of the house or what? Welcome to Education, the podcast that teaches you, that breaks down your rights and obligations. I'm Rachel, your host, and with me here is Damilola.
Hello everybody. Today, we begin a 3-part series. Landlord versus tenants. Very interesting topic. Landlord versus tenant rights. If you're a tenant, if you rent, you lease, or you own a property, sit down. This series is for you.
So in this first episode, tenant, find your sit down. Landlord, you say sit down. We're going to be teaching you guys the rights and the obligations that you are to know as a tenant. As a tenant, you know where you go choke head, where they talk. If they don't sign, no go there. As the landlord, you say, they'll tell you where, we're going to tell you where to sit down so that you know where you are. They'll call your name and where they'll not call your name. And who is going to help us to break all these things down if no other person than our barrister Timothy and Dayen.
Thank you. It's good to be back again. Thank you, Rachel.
You're welcome, sir. Welcome, sir.
Alright, barrister. So let's start from the beginning, from the foundation. So now, as a tenant, what legal rights do I have? What are my entitlements?
Both tenants and landlords have their rights, but we are starting with the tenant. Specifically, under the tenancy law of Lagos State, let me use that as a case study for other states, because every state has their tenancy laws and all. But let's use that of Lagos State. Under Section 7 of the tenancy law of Lagos State, it makes provision for certain rights that a tenant has. One of them is, we call it right to quiet enjoyment or quiet possession. And what does that mean? If you rent an apartment, a facility, you know that certain times you see landlords who still want to, it's my house, I can do anything and all of that. That may be infringing on the rights of the tenant. The tenant has a right to enjoy without any kind of interference, without any form of disturbance. For the period when the tenancy is in existence, the tenant should enjoy peaceful possession of that property without any disturbance from the landlord or from the landlord's agents or anybody. So that's one of the major rights. Another thing is that a tenant has a right to have valid tenancy agreement. I always advise it that don't rent an apartment, don't rent a house, don't enter into lease, for instance, without having a valid agreement. Because the agreement is what states out the specific terms of that tenancy. Okay, when is the tenancy going to start? When is the tenancy going to expire? Okay, how do we terminate this tenancy and all of that? Because if those specific things are not stated, it's not clear. Okay, imagine you pay rent today, and in your own mind, your intention is that no, my rent will start in February. I'm going to pack in February. But landlord will receive money today, and landlord is already saying that, well, your tenancy has started. The landlord is already feeling like, well, she has paid, tenancy has started. If there are no agreements as to that thing that looks so harmless like that, can be a major problem for that tenancy. That is why the agreement states it out. Oh, your rent, even though I am paying today, the rent will commence on February 1st. Oh, no, this rent will commence in June or July. the commencement will be in the agreement, the terms of the agreement. Oh, this house, you are renting it, it is strictly residential. That means you cannot use that for commercial purposes. You can't turn out today to say that you want to start selling something there, because in the agreement you have specified that this is what you want to use the property for. Oh, this property is for commercial use and all of that. That may, all of those things are stated in the agreement. Oh, how you are going to terminate the agreement. We have agreed that for anybody to terminate this agreement, you have to give 1 month notice. You have to give 6 months notice and all of that. All those things will be stated in the agreement. Because if there are no agreement, there are other, the law will also determine the termination and all of that. But for you to avoid any issues and all, put all of that in the agreement.
We often think law evolves around lawyers and courtrooms, but the truth is, law affects us every day of our lives. From the contracts we sign to our rights as humans on our everyday activities. House on Legals introduced to you in education, your weekly dose of law in everyday life. Join us every Friday on YouTube as we explore the world of law together. See you there.
Right now, another right that you have as a tenant is right against unlawful eviction. This is about the commonest issues between landlord and tenants. Tenant is owing, landlord feels like today is either I collect my money or you get out of the house. They knock on the house. Oh yeah, where's my money? No money. Oh yeah, now pack all your loads, get out of the house and all of that. If you don't get out, I will remove the roof. I will cut off your light. I will do all of it. That's what permitted under the law. There is a process that you go through to evict a tenant from the house. So the law specifies how a tenant can be evicted from the house, and that procedure has to be followed. If those procedures are not followed, the tenant will have the right to actually sue the landlord. It can be funny that tenant can sue a landlord, and landlord rather than the tenant paying rent now, the landlord paying that. So at least those are some of the rights of the tenant.
I have a question.
Okay.
How about those tenants that don't used to hear word because they are tenants that don't used to hear word? How about all those tenants that don't used to stay in the house? They are around, but they are not around. Their rent has expired. The landlord is not able to reach them, or the landlord has not seen them to say, okay, come and park and all. How about if the tenant should come and meet his or her stuff outside? Is that
That scenario that you painted is what can land the landlord in court. There is yes, it may look like he's the owner of the house.
But the tenant was not around now.
Yes, the fact that is okay. Let me paint a scenario. Number one is that the law specifies that even in that situation, there is a procedure for you to evict a tenant. And if you don't go through that procedure, you will find yourself in trouble. Now, let me paint a scenario. I am a tenant, then I am not around, like you stated. And in that building, I have some valuable things there that I kept there, or I claim that I kept some valuables there. And then I got back, you packed all my loads, you have put it outside. And I now claim to you, I have ₦1 million in the house. I put it somewhere in the house. I have some gold that I put in the house and all of that on account of it. So how do you now prove that no, I didn't see it? When you broke into my that's as good as you breaking into my house. You understand? So that's why the law specifies that even in that situation, there is a procedure that you must follow.
As the landlord now, what is my own right to tenant.
Yes, a landlord also has rights, and in fact, the law protects both the tenant and the landlord against excess. One of the major rights that the landlord has is rights to his rent. In fact, prompt payment of rent. I know for a landlord, his most important concern is how to get his rent, and that's the reason why people build their properties and all of that. Now, prompt payment of rent. In fact, the law requires that if you want to renew your rent, you have to renew that rent before the expiration of the current. So, tenant can be funny. Sometimes you tell them, hey, I will spend 3 months and I will not pay, and all of that. That's unfair to the landlord, and so the law also protects the landlord against all of those prompt payment of his rent. And then another very important thing is that the law recognizes that the property is an investment. Now, what is most valuable to the landlord is the property. Even if a tenant decides not to pay rent, the property is valuable to the landlord. So the law also recognizes that that's an investment. People labor many years to build a house, and all of that. And one of the rights that the landlord has is for the tenant to properly use the building or the property. Because it doesn't have to be a building, it can be a land, it can be any facility and all of that. So the tenant should use the property properly. We have seen situations where tenants will give houses to them. By the time you are coming back after 1 year or 2 years, you will not even recognize the property again due to wear and tears. They would have misused the property. Some will break the wall. They go ahead, partition the wall without taking the consent of the landlord.
So in that case, what can the landlord do?
In that situation, number one is that's why the agreement is very important. That in your tenancy agreement, you would have stated in the tenancy agreement that you cannot alter the property without first consulting with or seeking the consent of the landlord. And the landlord would have given, not that, and you just send the message to the landlord, I want to put an AC in the house, so I've broken the wall. That's just information. Now you have to seek the permission and ensure that you obtain that permission before you can proceed.
But what if the property catches fire?
No, of course, that's not
the tenant's
fault. Except it is now shown that you are negligent. Maybe that's a different thing entirely. We are talking about the remedies that are available to you. When we get to the part where we talk about the remedies available to the landlord and tenant, we will discuss all of that in depth. All right. So proper use of the property, use it with the fear of God. Just use the property with fairness, with the fear of God. One other right that a landlord has is the right to inspection. The landlord also has the right to come and inspect his property, but that inspection has to be with notice. That is, you give notice to the tenant according to whatever, of course, according to whatever agreement you have with your tenancy agreement. Maybe it's 24 hours notice that you give to the tenant and all of that, or 48 hours, whatever you agree on. That okay, I'm coming for inspection and all of that, and that inspection has to be within reasonable time also. You don't come to a tenant that come and knock at 10 p.m. and say that I want to search. Or you come early in the morning when they are still sleeping or having family time and all of that. So it has to be reasonable. So a landlord can come for inspection by himself or by his agent and all that. He has a right to do all of that. All right. So those are some of the rights that landlord have under the law.
Okay. So, are there any obligations both parties have, both landlord and tenant? What are the obligations?
Well, just like we have stated, it is the obligation of the tenant to pay rent. It is the obligation of the landlord to not disturb the tenant when he's still in possession, when his rent is still what we call active. You don't allow him to enjoy his property, quiet enjoyment of his property and all of that. It is the obligation of the tenant to ensure that the property is properly used, not to damage that property. Now, it is the obligation of the landlord to ensure that proper notices are given to the tenant where necessary for inspection or for eviction. Serve them proper notice. One of the obligation or a joiner to that is obligation of the landlord is that you must follow proper procedure for the eviction of the tenant and all of that. I've talked about prompt payment of rent. In fact, I'm sure for a landlord that's a top priority. Use the property fairly. Take the consent of the landlord where you want to alter the property. You have an obligation not to sublet that property. I rent a property to you. I don't like this property again. Then you go and sublet it to Rachel, for instance. That's not allowed, especially when it is also contained in the agreement. If you want to do something like that, it is the obligation of the tenant to seek the consent of the landlord to do anything.
So my future tenants, start gathering your rent now because you're not gonna owe me. You're not gonna owe me. Thank you very much, Safo. So my future tenants, start gathering your rent because they're gonna pay your money on time. Don't worry, I will not inspect your property on ungodly hours. Thank you very much, Safo. In our next episode, all the bri that tenants and landlords used to have, we're going to settle it here.
And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can't be collecting all these gist as a tenant. Now you know your rights. Now your landlord has infringed your rights. You can go to court now. You can't be collecting all this for free. So it won't take you anything. Just subscribe, like, comment, share. Thank you. We'll see you in our next episode. Bye.